And good afternoon or good morning for those in different time zones. Very pleased to welcome this webinar on the results of the definitive guide to B2B e-commerce buyer demands in 2024. Before we jump in with our wonderful guests, I suggest that we give maybe a couple of minutes for everyone to arrive. I see in the bottom right-hand side of my screen that we already have quite a few people logged in. People are on time. It's probably not the French and the Italians. But yeah, let's give everyone a couple more minutes. Okay, 30 more seconds and then let's jump right in. Okay, it's 3:02 in London, 4:02 in the UK. Very happy to welcome you to the survey and the results of the survey that we conducted with the panelists today. And this is fundamental research going back to the customer needs in e-commerce in a B2B context. I think this was really overdue research, because there's a lot going on about what are the merchant needs, what are the tools, the solutions for the merchants, but there's not that much going on for the buyers. And when we survey them, we see that there's quite a bit of discrepancy between what the buyers expect, what B2B buyers expect, and what merchants have to offer today. I'm Louis, co-founder and president at Hokodo. I'm very, very pleased to welcome three wonderful co-panelists today. And before we jump in, let me give you an overview of what's on the menu for today. We'll do a quick round of intros so that you know who's there and you're able to follow up with them, ask them questions towards the end. We'll book time at the end for questions. Once we've done that, we'll dive into some of the key insights of the report. I think all of us, we've been surprised by the extent to which the migration of B2B trade online is effective, how much has been happening. So it's going to be fascinating to share some of the most striking figures from the report. Then we'll do this in 15 minutes tops. We'll jump into the panel discussion, about 30 minutes with this panel, and then leave 10 minutes for Q&A and a few wrap-up thoughts. Let's dive right in. Very pleased to welcome Chris, Jason, and Aaron this afternoon. B2B, we'll see that one of the findings is massively different from B2C. And when we started to survey hundreds of B2B buyers for this study, we thought we also had to surround ourselves with people who brought massive B2B expertise, people who live and breathe B2B, who understand the difference between B2B and B2C, who've seen merchants going through their second or third migration, trying to tackle B2B clients and not always being very successful doing so. And this has contributed quite a lot of insights, and hence the panel today, to bring all this all this brain power together. So guys, maybe if I could ask you to say a few words, introduce yourselves, maybe starting with Chris from the left-hand side.
Sure. Hey, how you doing?
Hey,
Yeah,
Chris. Good
thanks,
to
Lou.
have you.
Thanks for letting me be involved and contributing to this as well. So I'm the UK lead for the B2B E-commerce Association. My colleagues there and I are ambassadors for B2B merchants and tech vendors, and it's our role to create a community of professionals who really want to succeed. So we've spent the last few years building a network of merchants, of tech partners like yourselves, and advisory boards around the globe to offer events and learning and contribution to papers like this to make sure that people are actually getting dedicated B2B advice and not secondhand retail facts that we have to translate to fit our needs.
Fantastic. Good to have you, Chris.
Thank you.
Still continuing left to right. Jason, maybe if you want to say a few words of intro.
Absolutely. Once again, thank you very, very much, Louis, for hosting this. Not only creating this original research and going to the effort to really dive into this, but also having, me as a guest panelist. And look, I know and respect Chris and Aaron tremendously, so it's amazing to be in such a esteemed company. I've been working in e-commerce for over 20 years. For the last 3.5 years, have owned and run Greenwood Consulting, which is a specialist B2B e-commerce consultancy. I also run and have founded the E-commerce Edge podcast, and we have almost 350 episodes published of the podcast. So it is my absolute pleasure to be here today.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Jason. And there's so much stuff that goes in depth into e-commerce on your podcast. It's amazing, and to everyone, I recommend it as a huge resource. Be it in acquisition or software, whatever you're thinking about when it comes to e-commerce. There's probably a couple of episodes on Jason's podcast that would address the questions. So yeah, thanks a lot for joining, Jason. And last but not least, this is alphabetical. Aaron, maybe welcome to the panel. Or is it me or you're on mute, Aaron?
Thank you. I was going to say thank you for having me on, and it's funny because normally when someone named Aaron is in an alphabetical sort, they're usually at the first. So it was refreshing to see that.
We went for the last names.
Exactly for the surname. So thank you. A lot of respect for Christopher and Jason, the content that their organizations put out. My name is Aaron. I'm the director of product marketing at OroCommerce, which is the only single license e-commerce platform built ground up for the scale of modern manufacturer, distributor, or wholesaler. We're a B2B focused commerce platform built by the original co-founders of Magento, which you've probably heard of. I'm the director of product marketing. I've been in the e-commerce space for about a decade, and most of that time has been spent actually serving B2B brands, manufacturers and distributors, sometimes people making their first early moves into e-commerce, their first step into digitization and the internets, and sometimes people on their third or their fourth rodeo, trying to make it better. So really happy to be here and very interested in the research, because you're absolutely right. There's so much about sellers and so little about buyers. So this is really great to see.
Yeah, and well, as you can see, these three guys know a thing or two about B2B. So it's going to be a pleasure for me to pick their brains and get the insights. Feel free to send questions in the chat, of course. And just to round up the intro, so as I said, I'm one of the co-founders at Hokodo. We're the leading payments provider for B2B in Europe. So for now, focused on Europe, but we've had more than 100,000 companies use Hokodo to access better payment terms. And essentially what we do is we help merchants sell more by providing a better payments experience to their buyers. So that's how we contributed to to the survey by providing this angle on the checkout. So let's dive into it and look at some of the most striking insights that Chris, Jason, Aaron, and I gathered during this survey. As I mentioned, we surveyed hundreds of buyers, and yeah, fundamentally, we wanted to, client is king, and we wanted with this research to see what B2B buyers were really after when they, purchase online, and what exactly makes them specific. And there's, a lot of research about e-commerce in general, but not that much when it comes to B2B e-commerce, and even less when it comes to the needs of B2B buyers. So that's really what we were after here. Without further ado, let's jump into the insights. So number one, and this one, I nearly fell off my seat when I saw it, because everyone talks about B2B trade moving online. And in fact, it's already online. Among the hundreds of buyers that we surveyed, 93% of them choose online channels when procuring for goods or services, whatever it is. So honestly, I was expecting something around 50-60%, but it came up much higher than that. I think we'll discuss it with the panel, but my 2 cents there is that even when someone is purchasing a high value item or something old fashioned, at the beginning of the purchasing journey, there's always some kind of online consideration. I want to see the catalog. I start my purchasing journey online. Of course, not all the transactions are done end-to-end online. I think depending on the country and how advanced the economy is, that's around 10 to 20%. But nonetheless, pretty much an overwhelming 93% have at some point an online touch point. So I think e-commerce is not really an option. And when I look at our clients at Hokodo and we discuss a bit their channel mix, the one channel that's growing double digit is the online channel. It's e-commerce. And I think any growth strategy today is an e-commerce strategy. And we'll be discussing some of this later on. Now, 93% of B2B buyers go online, but unfortunately, the experience that they get is not that great, because 98% of them report facing challenges during their purchase journey. This shows the gap between expectations and reality. It also says a lot about the opportunity for those who will be able to bridge the gap and deliver a decent experience. We're not talking about rocket science here, but really delivering the basics of user experience, slow, lengthy process. And I guess the UX has become pretty standard in B2C. B2B, there are variations by industry. You have different people that need to approve of a transaction and so on. So potentially it's a bit more difficult, but it's still amazing that 55% of the challenges are linked to UX. Then real-time product availability, 39%. Repeat order, same thing. That sounds like a pretty basic feature. In B2B, buyers come back. We see buyers who make 10, 20 transactions every month. They need to restock. So this feature, I'm sure Aaron will say that this is like part of the package of any B2B platform that's just adapted to the needs of B2B, but still in nearly 1/3 of the cases, this is not part of the standard functionality. Then 3 that talk about payment. This speaks to my heart, because payment is so key to creating trust in the platform. This is where the rubber meets the road, when the conversion actually happens on the platform. And we see that there's quite a lot of leakage. Still today, 2023, 27% of the cases, no payment terms offered, or it's the first purchase, you can't pay on credit terms. And the last one, unsuitable payment methods. So I think when we look at payments, there's the UX itself, how many clicks you have to go through. There's what are the terms that are offered to you, but also what is the settlement method. Do you get to settle by card? If you make a B2B purchase and it's more than $5,000 or euros, credit card's probably not the right method. In that case, do you support bank transfer? Do you support direct debit? Do you support local methods? I think this is something where we hear quite a lot of discontent. Then the next one I wanted to cover is, there's quite a lot of drop-offs, carts that are abandoned. 83% of B2B buyers report abandoning a B2B purchase for these reasons that we've seen, lack of the right payment methods, the poor UX. So this thing that we're talking about, this is not theory. It translates into the bottom line, into the dollars that you get at the end of the day. This is missed opportunities. Why spend so much in marketing, in acquisition, if at the end you have a prospect who abandons their purchase? There's so much money left on the table. And I think this is one of the, good news is this is one of the big levers of improvement that we have as an industry. So buyers expect swift credit decisions. More than 80% of them expect credit decisions that happen within a day. I think they come from a world of, as individuals being able to do one-click checkout on Amazon or, any other B2C platform for that matter. And then suddenly you reach a B2B registration flow where you need to pre-register, be vetted, eventually be granted, payment terms, or you're allowed to open a trade account, things that you would do much faster either on B2C e-commerce or in real life in good old B2B. So this is really a sticking point, and being able to provide real-time decisions. At Hokodo, we try to do it in less than a second. That's our benchmark. So here, there's an expectation that's more modest of less than a day, but apparently it's not, that expectation is not met in more than four buyers out of 5. So the next one is when we ask B2B buyers in the current environment, what could make them increase the size of their basket, what could drive their loyalty? 79% unexpectedly see payment terms as something that's important for their growth. And I think we need to put ourselves in the shoes of the B2B buyers and how they've built their working capital cycle. In traditional B2B trade, more than one transaction out of 2 benefits from payment terms. And then if you ask me as a B2B buyer to shift my purchase online, and then I go online and I don't get those payment terms, this is going to give me, to hit me in my working capital and how much liquidity I can then deploy to the rest of my business. And it's constraining my growth. So in an environment of increasing interest rates and so on, where liquidity really becomes the, cash is king, that becomes the constraining factor for many businesses, not being able to offer the right payment terms, is a blocker for 79% of B2B buyers. And this is a recap. Again, it was staggering. Of course, we've taken some of the most striking stats out of the survey, but 94%, that matches what we were saying at the very beginning, of the sellers say they want to be operational online in 2024. they really need to purchase online. It's part of how they streamline their own procurement. 79% say that those payment terms are critical in how they compare suppliers. If all else being equal, if I'm buying the same product and I have the choice between supplier A and supplier B, and supplier A gives me 30-day payment terms and supplier B tells me pay up front, I'm gonna go to supplier A. That's a no-brainer. So yeah, no wonder then that 86% of B2B buyers report that payment terms are a key consideration when choosing their suppliers. So I think that's some of the findings we gathered in the report. I invite you to download the full report to access the results of this survey, and a lot of actionable advice that's very tailored to B2B. And as we do this, of course, now let's move to the interesting bit. Use these, keep these insights in the back of our heads, and move to the panel. So, yeah, again, so Chris, Jason, Aaron, good to have you today. Let me start with a question for Chris, but of course we can make it quite dynamic and interactive. If Jason and Aaron, you want to shed light or contribute a different perspective, feel free to expand, and we make this a dialogue. So, Chris, what was obviously you speak to hundreds of merchants as part of the B2B E-commerce Association. You lead the UK chapter. So the UK is one of the most digital economies in the world. You see so many of them. So I guess you know this inside out. But when you looked at the results from the survey, what number, what statistics, what finding really struck you the most?
Yeah, great question. Well, I wasn't surprised by 98% of people facing challenges.
Oh, really?
I felt like that was something that probably would have kind of reinforced my views, because for a decade, B2B businesses have kind of been hamstringed into using B2C built tools to put their businesses on. And so we're shoehorning users into a flow that isn't designed for them. And so no wonder they would find that frustrating. If you're buying for work, you're probably not buying for yourself. So having pop-ups to sign up for a newsletter and get these reward points, they're not always things that person's interested in. They want to log in, see that price, get it done, and get out. But one of the things that I did find interesting was when I started to dig deeper into the report. So the headlines are fantastic for a quick read, but if you start to read into some of the tables, there's some really interesting numbers in there. And for me, it was that for online and offline orders, over 40% of people were looking for better customer support. And that struck me as a number, because this has obviously come from our buyers, our merchants' buyers. They're telling, my contacts, my customers of my B2B agency as well, we want you to do better customer support. But B2B forever has been steady, it's relationship based, it's human to human. So why are they demanding better customer support? Like, where's that coming from? And I think what's happening is, we're now able to scale our businesses beyond the normal amount of customers that we could traditionally service. And we're focusing on scaling sales, scaling conversion, scaling for growth. But are we taking the time to stop and also look at post-sales, being able to grab hold of your invoices, being able to resolve a problem with pricing? How are we speaking to this new wave of digital natives who are now running and owning businesses, who prefer to live chat, WhatsApp, social message. And to me, some of the detail in this report kind of added some good insight to some of the things that I kind of knew but didn't have any solid data to. So that's the bit that struck me, and I'm kind of happy that number was there. It was a bit higher than I thought it might have been.
Yeah, we'd want that number to be higher, but still, I think you're making a good point where B2B is not a sausage machine like B2C can be. It's high touch with a lot of product variations, a lot of things that need to be adjusted post sale, and so on, and without a good customer service, it's probably you can't deliver the full experience that those professional buyers have, and the stakes are much higher than when you're buying an extra pair of shoes for yourself. You're actually making a big purchase for your business, so it's
even if you're thriving in B2B, let's say you're absolutely crushing it, you are getting everything right, and you're growing and growing and growing. Are you focusing on the customer service part as well? Or have you just got your eyes on growth? Because, I used to work in B2B sales as a sales rep, and it was all about the relationship. Really tight conversations, being able to get hold of somebody when you needed them. And when you've agreed a price, when you've given your loyalty to a business and you've negotiated something and then it's not right, it feels a bit more personal than if you're going online and your tin of beans at Tesco has gone up by 2p. It's like, that's not my price. You want to be able to get somebody there and then. Otherwise, you're going to have to raise an invoice. Then you're going to have to request a credit note. Then you're going to have to process a credit note. And it's effort in your business that you don't want to take on more work.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Chris, for these insights. Sorry, did I interrupt anyone? No, thanks, Chris. Jason, maybe turning to you, there's this massive statistic that 93% of B2B buyers are now using e-commerce channels, which, I mean, for me was literally mind-blowing. Do you still see in your consulting activities as a B2B expert, do you still meet businesses who haven't migrated online or whose migration is still happening? What would be your advice to those businesses?
Yeah, look, it's very common. Unfortunately, it is still massively common for B2B brands to not have any form of e-commerce, or what they consider digital commerce is usually EDI, maybe punch out, something like that, and they kind of implement that and they call it good, and they don't offer a self-service e-commerce function for their small and medium-sized customers. And so they're really only servicing through digital channels their very largest whale customers that can integrate via EDI. And they're missing out on bringing digital self-service to the rest of their customer base. And that statistic that you called out there ties in nicely to one of the other big statistical call-outs that I noticed in the report, which was once again, it wasn't one of the main headlines, but it really spoke to me, which is that 69% of B2B buyers find researching suppliers online on their own more effective than interacting with a sales representative during the discovery process. And what that speaks to me is not only do many B2B brands not do e-commerce at all, but of the ones that do, we find that in excess of probably 90% of those have a gated experience, meaning that unless you authenticate, you can't see the catalog, you can't even see the products that they carry, you can't see prices, you can't see MOQs, you can't see anything in relation to what this brand actually does, except for maybe the headline on the website and maybe their brand name. Now, this is a massive problem. This is a massive challenge because increasingly B2B buyers are identifying and finding their suppliers online. They're searching online for their suppliers in the same way that in their personal life, they're searching for that thing that they want to use in their home. And if the experience is not ungated, what that means is Google can't even index your catalog. And with amazing platforms like Oro and others today, we now can ungate the experience whilst not showing some of those maybe mission critical private factors that B2B businesses don't want to expose. We don't have to expose inventory levels. We don't have to expose pricing. We don't have to expose MOQs. We don't have to expose all these other things. So we can take a hybrid approach. We can say, okay, we're going to expose our catalog, but we're going to show the most restricted or limited version of our catalog that is available to absolutely everybody who signs up as a customer with us. Or we're going to show the catalog and the most expensive pricing tier we have available, and then create an opportunity for people to inquire for better trade pricing. So we have this hybrid model that businesses can go to the market with. But I think one of the very first things, especially for that percentage of B2B brands who don't do e-commerce at all, they just simply do not offer it, gated or otherwise. One of the things I recommend is starting with an adoption plan before you even get into the scoping phase of the project. And I'm not just talking about a customer adoption plan. I'm talking about an internal adoption plan too, because at the end of the day, with your salespeople and field sales reps, internal account executives, customer service, etc., the reality is, unless they are on board with this new digital channel, they are never going to be able to onboard, train, and upskill their customers on using these digital channels. So it's a synergistic relationship between your internal team and your customers. And unless both are on board for that journey, you will never get high enough adoption to see ROI on what is admittedly a very big investment for businesses to make in self-service e-commerce.
Yeah, and there are so many of those e-commerce projects that end up not delivering. I think in general, but then in B2B in particular, I guess as a consultant in this area, does it frequently happen that you're called in to rescue a merchant who's halfway through a transition, and maybe they only saw the kind of technical part of the tool that needs to be rolled out, and not the internal adoption plan, the cultural change that needs to happen for also the company itself to be able to use that opportunity and deliver to the end customer?
Yeah, I think oftentimes B2B brands, they go into it with selfish intent and the customer knows it, right? It's all about, how can we make the business more efficient? How can we take CPQ online? How can we reduce the manual effort or at least the administrative effort that our customer, that our sales team are spending on administrative activities, as opposed to the value add of building relationships and going out and hunting new business. I think that it's very, B2B brands, they're very operationally and technically focused. And as a result of that, it's a very inward look. It's a very myopic view on what e-commerce should be doing for the business, not what e-commerce should be doing for the customer. And I think when we turn it outward and the focus is really outward on the customer, then we work back from that. What is the experience we're trying to create? B2C and D2C has done this for years. They've been, they're very advanced in terms of the customer experience on the front end, and marketing teams are making sure that the experience is pixel perfect. The brand is presented in the best light. We've got search, merch, personalization technology. We've got all these amazing user experiences in the B2C and D2C world. And in a B2B world, we're worried about tech and ops. We're worried about efficiency. We're worried about all that stuff. But so are our B2B customers. They're worried about efficiency. They're worried about getting in and getting out. They're worried about making sure they see the right catalog with the right price, with the right buying increments, et cetera, et cetera. And then I think also, even from a digital customer service perspective, I remember, Chris called out something really important here, which is that even of the brands that I work with that either have an existing e-commerce website or they're doing it for the first time, they don't usually offer the digital customer service channels that the B2C and D2C world have offered for a decade. How many B2B brands offer live chat on their B2B e-commerce website? I would venture to say almost zero. I almost never see it. So these types of experiences, this digital concierge service with the video customer service, right, which is becoming increasingly common in the B2C and D2C world, This is not common. You never see it. You almost never see it in the B2B world. And so I think there's a tremendous opportunity for B2B brands to take advantage of this existing gap, and they really can leapfrog their competitors. And it's the bar is set pretty low. I'll tell you that right now in the B2B world. So it is not that difficult to stand out as a supplier that has a superior digital customer experience. It's just not that hard to be better than everybody else. Or in most cases, you're offering a digital experience that simply does not exist with your competitors.
Yeah, and that point that you're making about, a lot of B2B merchants having a product-centric approach, inward-focused, instead of thinking about in basic terms about the customer. I think that's a good segue to a question I wanted to ask to Aaron, where maybe this explains why a shocking 98% of buyers are saying that they are facing issues at the checkout. Is this something that resonates with you? And
Oh, yes.
How do you explain that?
Well, I mean, I think Jason just alluded to it a little bit, but I would say e-commerce for a lot of B2B companies is an IT cost center and not a revenue center. It's seen as the equivalent of paying for printer ink. So that operational focus tends to mean that the ERP is the center of all IT procurement focus and attention, whether that's an off-the-shelf system or some kind of custom Frankenstein's monster that's been built over 30 years out of custom tables and little micro apps and things like that. But because of that, I think the transacting piece of e-commerce, the user experience, and the self-service customer service piece of that as well. So the being able to pay an invoice, being able to look up order status, being able to see past orders, being able to view who's an approved buyer maybe, and what level of permissions they have, that kind of stuff that historically requires a telephone call or an email. All of that gets sort of wrapped up into a user experience that is often forgotten in favor of making sure that, there's pricing for some people on the web, and that's it. That's all that exists. So, and I would say B2B buying is complicated, right? So when you get to the checkout, there's usually a lot more information that goes into that purchase than there is, Louis, if I'm spinning the wheel on my Shopify site to get that deal on my socks, and then I just click the button and now I have socks. It doesn't work that way for B2B. There's a lot of fulfillment information. There's a lot of financial information. I may have multiple layers of approval, and every time I come back to the site, I have to interact in some way as part of a long-term buying process. And so the checkout, because it's underinvested in, can't handle the complex buying cycle in B2B. So a lot of, it's unfortunately, it's true. The ERP runs everything, and the e-commerce checkout gets somewhat forgotten.
And what's the most common mistake that you've seen among your clients, Aaron, when it comes to those issues at checkout?
I think there's two things that stand out to me. One is speed, and I mean that the checkout, the whole experience is simply not optimized to move quickly. There's a lot of calling back to the ERP with playing Mother May I with some back office system that was built in the 80s and maybe doesn't respond in a timely manner to real-time questions and user interactions. And I mean, I don't know, Jason and Christopher, have you ever been on a B2B site where the checkout took a minute plus to complete? Because I have, right?
We see that as a massive problem in the B2B space. And I attribute that usually to the fact that our carts have many, many, many more line items and units in them than the average B2C cart. I think the global average in the B2C world is like 2.2 or something like that, depending on the data and depending on the market, items per cart. Mm-hmm. That's kind of the global average. In the B2B, I don't know what the statistics are in the B2B world, but it must be more like 20 or 30 lines. So the reality is, in order for a B2B checkout to be fast and efficient, it not only has to process what's in the cart, but it also has to process based on the price list, based on the other rules of that particular checkout. And sometimes we even have a different price list per location for that B2B buyer, because that location that we're delivering to might be further away than another location in our chain, for example. So there is so much more complexity, and that's just one element of complexity in a B2B checkout. So what we see is that the checkout in the B2B world typically has orders of magnitude more friction associated with it than in the B2C and D2C world, where they've streamlined the bejesus out of checkout in the B2C world. But in the B2B world, checkout can often be clunky. It can be slow. And to your point, Aaron, not only can the cart itself and the cart logic be very slow, but then when we think of exposing, for example, where someone stands in relation to their credit limit, where they stand in relation to credit stop, where they stand in relation to order approval workflows, things like that, it starts to bring in scenarios that we would just never see in the B2C world. And if all of those use cases, and in some cases edge cases, have not been catered for in the checkout, we'll just get abandonment, and the customer will just revert to it'll become a self-fulfilling prophecy. They will abandon, and they'll pick up the phone to call their sales rep, and then the merchant will wonder, well, why are we not getting 25 to 50% of our sales through e-commerce? And all of a sudden, it's because everybody's abandoning at the cart, at the checkout, because the experience is so rubbish.
Well, and Jason, I mean, one of the other things they might do is they might not pick up the phone to call their rep. They might just go on the competitor's website or go to Amazon Business. There's one other part of this too, which is I think lack of information. So, and what I mean is, because of everything Jason just mentioned and the complexities of the checkout, the buyer has to enter a lot more detail at the point of the transaction. So the ship tos, the carrier account numbers, if they're using a carrier account, for instance, maybe more than one. PO number, open POs that are still in use. I have to go look that up and type it all over again. Tax exempt certification numbers comes up for some buyers. So here's the thing: if it's a guest checkout on a B2C side, I don't expect that brand to know those things about me. But if I have a business with you, if I've been transacting with you, if I have an account with you, if I have open credit with you, I kind of expect you to know those things in advance. And the speed is not just the technological speed of processing a giant cart, but there's also the perceived speed of, am I having to type in a huge amount of extra detail every single time I make a transaction? That slows you down too. And so, the e-commerce platform, you should know things about your buyers, right? So ask the right questions in advance and make sure that your checkout, whatever it is, can remember things that it's being told better than maybe ChatGPT can.
And I think sorry, Lou, I was just going to add, Aaron, you raise a very good point that in addition, we have this wonderful thing in the B2B world called will call, right? Which is effectively the equivalent of click and collect in the B2C world, right? And so in many cases in the B2B world, we need to do inventory transfers between warehouse locations to facilitate will call. And so that adds an additional layer of complexity within the B2B world that isn't always present in the B2C world, but yet will call can compose a significant, if I'm on a job site and I need some goods to complete a job, I want to, and a warehouse is nearby, I want to be able to nip down the road. I want to be able to get all the gear, and then I want to be able to go back and I want to be able to complete this job, right? Especially if it's in the construction sector or similar. And so we have all the additional complexity of warehouse locations, inventory locations. We have most B2B brands are a hybrid maybe of a manufacturer, distributor, and a wholesaler. Rarely are they just one. And so therefore, in some cases, they will hold inventory of some of their catalog, but not the rest. So showing what is available from a given location, available for will call right now versus at dates in the future. We just have so many orders of magnitude higher complexity in the B2B world that the checkout is just, it's kind of fraught with challenges when you don't think it through and all the use cases for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And yet, despite that complexity, it's vital to deliver that kind of faster, smoother experience at checkout, because one thing we measured is every second of lag or latency that you have in your checkout is a 7 percentage point decrease in conversion. So that's leakage, and that's people who are too tired, pick up the call, or worse, as Aaron was saying, they go to your competitor's website and you never see them again. So that's fascinating. One question I wanted to ask from you as B2B experts is, we see that there's a majority of buyers who say that they will abandon a basket if payment terms aren't offered. I'd be interested to get your take on this, also with your different geographical angles. Chris, you have a kind of North America and Kiwi cap on, and knowing how is the payment experience evolving in your respective geographies? What are the expectations these days? How do you see it evolving? So that's a question to all of you, whoever wants to take it.
I was going to say, I think it is broad and it does change. For me, I come back to the human to human relationship part, and it's not necessarily payment terms aren't offered. Sometimes it's my payment terms aren't here. I want to deal with you on my terms at my time of day, and my terms that I've agreed with you aren't here, and you're forcing me to do it in a way I don't want to do. Yeah, I can, somewhere else I can do it. And so, they're seeing you maybe as their supplier slipping behind, not being as good as another supplier, wondering why you can't offer that when so-and-so can. And typically it's a technology thing. It's never really more than that. But I think people find it more frustrating because it's more personal. They want to use you. They've agreed terms to do it. Why aren't they everywhere that I touch your business? And especially if they're a really big buyer, for the biggest of the biggest, Jason says this in his podcast all the time, but the biggest of the biggest are EDI. They have that. They demand, they get it. Their prices, their way, digitally, whenever they want it. But your next layer down, the big clients, the ones who make up a big chunk of your business, maybe they're not getting that. And that's frustrating them. And that's probably why they're becoming that squeaky wheel about it, because they want it, and they want it ages ago.
I would add, we have to remember that in B2B, it's teams of people buying from teams of people. And so the person who is doing the buying is not paying the invoices in that organization. And so if I, as the buyer, if you're forcing me to have an email and a meeting with my AP people every month, because the way we cut checks on the second Tuesday of every month, but my supplier is telling me that I have to pay on the fourth Wednesday or whatever, and every single month I have to get on the phone or get on the email with my AP person who does not have any stake in this transaction other than it's an administrative task for them. And so having that a trade credit or credit limit or agreed upon payment terms that are personal to everything Christopher said, if you don't do that, what you're doing is you're causing internal administrative friction for that team of people that is buying from you, and that's not good. That's not good for retention. It doesn't make people feel good about the relationship with you as the supplier.
And I think it also comes down to the fact that many B2B brands don't think about fallbacks, meaning what happens when I've exceeded a credit stop limit? Am I then presenting them with fallback options? Am I presenting them with ACH? Am I presenting them with BNPL? Am I presenting them with the ability to pay with a business credit card if I'm on credit stop? Am I offering them alternatives, or at least am I allowing them to complete the sale knowing that they're on credit stop, and then dealing with that and giving them options to clear some part of their credit account to allow the order to actually be released and shipped? So there are many, many use cases where we want to secure the order. We want to make it as friction-free to receive the order as possible, but then after the fact, give them many different options in terms of the way that they pay us and the way that they settle their accounts with us. And depending on the approval and escalation workflows, that needs to happen seamlessly behind the scenes so that neither the sales rep nor the buyer actually has to think about that administrative function, to Aaron's point. So I think what happens is these B2B brands, again, I go back to this thing, B2B brands are myopic about how can we use e-commerce to create these barriers so that we don't have to do much administrative work, and how can we benefit ourselves through this e-commerce experience, as opposed to thinking, what are all the pain points? And this goes back to my adoption comment. Unless you are canvassing your customers and having a dialogue with your customers about what they want to see in your digital experiences before you start scoping that solution, you are most likely building for you and not for them. And that is a major problem.
Yeah.
Can I just add to that? Because I think that, working in the association has been an eye-opener even for me. Like, I've been doing B2B for a decade, building e-commerce websites, helping people grow. And suddenly I am now connected to technology and businesses that I've never heard of, ever, never even seen. And they're popping up weekly. New CMSs dedicated. I've got a list now of 50 dedicated B2B CMSs. There's and payment providers and customer support, integrations, data warehouses, all sorts of tools. If you take the time to understand what your customers want, there is something already out there and more choice every single day to do something now. And, I think sometimes we kind of make it sound maybe like it's a really steep hill for merchants as well to start making their customers happy. But I don't think it is, because with my agency and kind of the day-to-day work, we see that the merchants who are just making incremental changes, adding improvements bit by bit to their sites, are getting positive feedback. You don't have to go out, re-platform, rebuild, redesign. You just have to start listening to your customers and making some changes, and it will happen. Like, add that payment option to your checkout, add live chat, just start doing a few things, and they will communicate even more with you when they see that change. So yes, I think there's a lot of recurring themes in the B2B world at the moment, and some of it is it's relationships, it's human, and those customers do want to tell us what they want from us.
Yeah, and there's a question that just came into the chat talking about this question of the payment terms, and to what you were also saying a bit earlier, Chris. What size of customers, of buyers need them? So let me read. It's two questions in one. So there's, which size of merchants find the capability to offer net terms to their buyers more essential? Is it going to be large merchants or smaller ones? And on at the receiving end, for which size of business buyers do you think the option of net terms is more critical? Enterprise buyers or SMBs or mom and pop shops? So two questions about who offers and who receives payment terms. What's your perspective on this?
In my experience, it is a default expectation, both on the buyer side and the seller side. For most B2B, it is absolutely a default expectation that payment terms are part of the trading terms of that negotiated B2B buyer relationship, right? I think that there's an expectation that, obviously, if you're a smaller buyer, you don't have your weight to throw around, so you don't really get to dictate terms. You don't get to dictate credit limits. You don't get to dictate the timelines for payment. You don't get to dictate any of that. So unfortunately, yet again, it comes to the biggest buyers. They can swing their weight around and they can say, well, you're offering me 30-day payment terms. No, I'm going to pay in 90 days. That's our payment cycle. Well, like it or lump it. We'll go find another supplier if you won't supply 90-day terms. Or, hey, you want to give us a $10,000 credit limit? We're expecting to every 30 days be spending $100,000 with you. We need at least a $100,000 credit limit. That's it. Or rolling credit. So I think it does depend a little bit on size and scale of who can throw their weight around and which party gets to dictate terms. But I would say they're absolutely. I'm working with a client in New Zealand. They're a B2B business. They're a wholesale distribution business, and their go-to-market UVP, one of their go-to-market UVPs is that they offer better credit terms than any one of their competitors by a country mile. They offer 120-day credit terms, and they offer the highest credit limits of any of their competitors. So just credit terms alone for them are a strategic competitive advantage. Yes, there's a cost of capital, but they build that into their pricing model, and they just offer these credit terms. Because remember, in the B2B world, most B2B buyers are not buying a product to then immediately use in their business. They are buying a product that they then hold in inventory, and there's usually a lag between the time they buy the product and the time they sell the product and generate revenue from that sale. And so any B2B brand that can supply the float for that period of time, that lag time between purchase and on sell, is going to have an automatic competitive advantage. So I would say the more flexible you can be around your credit terms and the more flexible you can afford to be, that can become a very strong competitive advantage.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for this super clear answer. There's another question that came, and I think the three of you as consultants or experts in those B2B projects will have a perspective. So it seems like I should be wary of tech solutions and platforms which are B2C originally, but are being sold to businesses. How can I tell if a product is genuinely built for B2B e-commerce? Who wants to take that one?
Well, I answered it in the chat actually just now, but I'll reiterate for those who aren't in the chat. I mean, this is Oro's thing, right? So I feel obligated. But, this is our competitive advantage. I think checking references and case studies is a good place to start, right? Because for a lot of, if you're a B2B focused solution, the companies that you see and the customer success stories, the case studies, should reflect that. You should see wholesalers, distributors, manufacturers, suppliers. You should see use cases that look like yours, right, in their body of work. And so that's a good place to start. I mean, if you go to the homepage and it's a lot of consumer brand logos for the most part, and you have to drill, you have to go find B2B and it's buried in a submenu somewhere. Like, oh yes, we also do that, right? That's not a focus. That's an opportunistic play. I would also say from a technical standpoint, one of the biggest differences I see between B2B focused, from an e-commerce platform standpoint anyway, and those that aren't, are the customer data model. So remember in B2C, it's very often to have guest checkouts. It's very often to assume that one email address is one buyer. And so all my AR rolls up to one email address. All my purchase history rolls up to one email address. It's teams buying from teams, guys. And when it comes to B2B, and that's not true. And so you can usually figure out pretty quickly if I'm able to manage a multi-user organization as a buyer organization on an e-commerce platform and not have it be one email address to one general ledger, basically. So I would start there. I'd be super curious to hear what Jason and Christopher have to say.
Well, I would. Oh, sorry, Jason. I see you just. I was just going to say. I think I haven't been in an agency for so long. I think part of the reason people end up on the wrong platform is they let the shiniest features of the marketing of the platform attract them, and there's not enough time taken to stop and go, what do I want? What do my customers need? Then go and find a platform that ticks all those boxes. They go out and go, oh, I need a B2B platform. This one says it's B2B. I'll bend my business to fit that. And I have a mantra, which is technology works for me. I don't work for it. And so I will make sure that we know what our customer wants before we specify the platform, and we try and get as close to those requirements with a platform rather than going the other way.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I always, as a consultant, I always operate by the 80-20 rule. We do deep dive discovery. We try to say, okay, cool. for both your business and your customer experience needs, can the e-commerce platform that we're working with and that we're doing search and select for achieve about 80% of that functionality out of the box without heavy customization? So in other words, can we do it just through configuration primarily? And if so, then they should probably be in the consideration set for search and select for those platforms. But I would also argue that there is usually a tremendous amount of internal work and other back-end system work to be able to support e-commerce that brands aren't often thinking about. And oftentimes it's their product data, first of all, is oftentimes severely lacking for digital channels. They don't have enriched product data. They don't have attributes. They don't have images. They don't have, PDFs of their spec sheets, exploded drawings. They don't have all of the product information readily available in a digital format in a centralized location so that we can then distribute that through digital channels like self-service e-commerce. And so oftentimes I'm going in and I'm helping them with data engineering, data reconfiguration, consolidation, data aggregation. We need to start thinking about things like PIM systems because, if a B2B brand doesn't yet do e-commerce, then oftentimes their ERP is the single source of truth of kind of all data, and ERPs are notoriously bad at being able to house enriched product data for digital channels. And so there's a lot that goes into this platform selection, but there's also a lot of groundwork that brands often need to do behind the scenes. And even if they've got the budget, they're ready to go, they're bought into B2B e-commerce, they're like, get in, scope this out, I want to be live in 6 months. It's like, well, that's great. And we might even have the technology that's affordable and accessible for your business to do this job, but there's a lot of internal work that needs to happen before, even if the agency can get you live in 6 months, you're not ready to go live in 6 months. Yeah. And so this is where this is where the rubber hits the road for these brands.
Yeah. And thank you so much for these very, these words of wisdom, Jason. This is so true. I think e-commerce is not only a purely technological issue, and I think Aaron and Chris, you also alluded to it. It's a transformation of the company. It's a change in process. It's a change in the timing of the workflows. I had so many additional questions I wanted to ask you guys. I've only been through three or four, but I see we're running out of time. So, thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Thank you, Chris, Jason, and Aaron for joining. It was amazing to have all those insights. I think there's much more that people can find in the report, so I'm flashing it here. Don't hesitate to download the definitive guide to B2B e-commerce buyer demands 2024. You'll find all the stats and advice from these the guys around the table on how to manage your B2B sales and what your customers actually expect. If you're looking for a great platform to run an e-commerce, your B2B e-commerce, the guys at Oro are there. If you're in the middle of a transformation project, looking for the right providers, Chris and Jason are all ears, and for all things payments in a B2B context at Hokodo, we're happy to take any questions, of course, and help you through these transitions. And thank you everyone for taking part. That was amazing. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks for hosting us. Appreciate it, Louis.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, and it was amazing. I think there's lots of questions that I see still online in the chat. We'll try and pick them up separately. Thanks again, everyone. Thanks to the panelists, and we'll see you soon. Good luck, B2B. Bye-bye.